Good afternoon and welcome to our webinar series from Lean Focus. This topic for today's session is entitled Building a World-Class Continuous Improvement Organization. I will be your moderator today. My name is Damon Baker, and in a minute I will turn it over to your two panelists for today's topic. A few logistics items to note before we get into the material. Today's webinar will be made available via a recording and will come in the form of an email attachment to your original sign-up email registration. You may want to check your spam folder if you do not receive that. Otherwise, you can always go to our Lean Focus company page on LinkedIn and watch this and any other webinar that we've conducted in the past. Additionally, in the GoToWebinar panel, there are some handouts related to this topic on continuous improvement, and also some handouts related to Lean Focus service offerings. There are 4 handouts there that you can download during this presentation at any time. They will not be made available after the presentation. Lastly, there are some questions that can be answered at the end of today's session. So there's a question panel where you can enter your question, and at the conclusion of the webinar, I will be reading the questions aloud to both Ryan and Dennis and have them answer your questions that you've written down here. This material is proprietary. We ask that you not share this material with anyone outside of yourself. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to the panelists and have them start their presentation.
Okay, thanks, Damon. My name is Dennis Mabes, and I'll be one of the presenters today. My background is in human resources. Worked with several large and medium-sized companies over the last 40 years, almost 40 years now. So much of my career is focused on building high-performing continuous improvement organizations and acquiring and developing the talent to run those businesses. So after a long career with companies like Danaher and Ford, I'm now the Senior Vice President for the leadership practice at Lean Focus. And I'm pleased to be joined today by Ryan Lisiak, who will share his background. He's been a successful business leader and has some impressive experience with lean transformation processes and tools. So Ryan?
All right, thanks, Dennis. I hope you're all doing well. Thanks for your time today. My name is Ryan Lisiak. I've been learning and practicing lean for about 15 years now with companies such as Danaher, Waste Management, and most recently MW Industries, where I was Vice President and General Manager with P&L responsibility for 2 businesses here in Connecticut where I live. I've been with Lean Focus now for about a year and a half, working with a dozen or so companies in a variety of industries at various stages of their lean journey. Excited and honored to be here today. Thanks again for joining. So for the next 40 minutes or so, Dennis and I would like to share our thoughts on building a world-class continuous improvement organization. We'll leave plenty of time at the end for questions before wrapping up near the top of the hour. We'll start first with an overview of Lean Focus. Then we'll share our experiences of what good looks like. There's really no single right answer here, but there is a common framework that we have seen that we'll share. Then we'd like to describe a few ways that we at Lean Focus currently help organizations build and develop this recommended structure. Then we'll give an example of a client case study. And then lastly, as I mentioned, we'll open up for questions. Dennis?
Yes, so first of all, I want to apologize. My picture is not up on the screen. I had a little technical difficulty, so glad to have the audio, but no visual today. So for a few of the folks on the call that may know me, that could be actually a very good thing. So I'll make a shout out to Lauren Wolf and the team there at Yak Attack. Thanks for joining, and you know, again, I'm sure you'll appreciate not seeing my face on the screen here. But transforming businesses for good. I think one of the things that I wanted to talk about as we go through this slide is really a couple of things. As we talk about at Lean Focus, our goal is really to help transform businesses in a way that delivers breakthrough, sustainable improvements, sustainable results in their businesses. And I think many of us on the call here have seen good short-term results achieved through finesse. But our vision is to build a lasting continuous improvement culture. Our mission is really to change old ways of thinking and replace them with fact-based, candid, transparent, and open communications. Our values are really around every individual respected, humble leaders who equip and support employees to achieve results, and customer focus. When we talk about Gemba focus, customer focus, going to the site, going to where the work is being done, and always with a high expectation. So lean organization is really focused on 3 improvement areas: growth, profit, and working capital. Growth, things like market penetration and market adjacencies, product expansion, and even price realization, getting the price our products and services deserve. Profit, not only cost reduction, but quality improvement, value engineering, and reduction in waste. And of course, working capital, having not just less inventory, but the right inventory, managing cash well, as well as fixed capital efficiency.
Great. So although lean began with manufacturing at Toyota, as you might know, these principles are equally beneficial across a variety of industries. This slide just shows some of the examples of companies we've worked with in a variety of industries, such as medical devices, oil and gas, high tech, private equity, etc. Takeaway here, there's really no limitation as to which industry lean can add value. Each industry and each company has its own special circumstances, and we at Lean Focus have the deep experience in assisting a broad set of companies on their own lean journey. So how we create value? Lean Focus adds value to our partners in a variety of ways based on the needs of each client. In a broad sense, though, this really takes one or more of the following 4 types. First, in the bottom left is a set of foundational tools. These are excellent at the outset and apply continuously throughout a lean journey. We'll talk more about these tools today as they are extremely important in building a continuous improvement culture. Next, we have a set of growth tools that help a client do things such as expand into new markets, as Dennis mentioned, improve sales effectiveness, develop new products, and improve value capture through price. Continuing through the circle, we've got lean tools that help an organization deliver breakthrough results on SQDIP, safety, quality, delivery, inventory, and productivity. Finally, but critically, is a set of leadership tools. These help clients address organizational needs to match their aspirations. I'd like to turn it back over to Dennis to talk to this final quadrant in greater detail.
Yeah, so today, as Ryan mentioned, we'll be focusing on this quadrant, the leadership system. And the leadership system at Lean focuses around several key elements. One is leadership development, delivering and supporting experiential learning, coaching, and training, really to lead the implementation of whether it's a lean culture or you have a lean culture in place and you're trying to roll out a new business plan, new strategic plan, but around leadership development. Second is to identify where you need to fill gaps, where you need to recruit and onboard leaders to execute strategic plans, and of course the CI organization. And then finally, designing an org structure that actually supports a continuous improvement culture, the processes, the tools that drive a sustainable transformation. We'll talk more in a few minutes about how to access tools from Lean Focus, but let's talk a little bit more about building a continuous improvement structure.
All right, so our recommended continuous improvement structure in terms of talking about what good looks like, I think the best way to think about that is an analogy of building a house. So I'm admittedly not in the construction business, but if I were, I'd like to first begin with a good survey of the area. I'd like to get a good feel of what I'm working with, both the good and the bad, identify any obstacles or deficiencies before I begin. Then I design the structure of the house, know what type of house I'm building, as well as the layout or plan or strategy of how we get there, if you will. Third, I'd gather the tools and equipment necessary for the job, as well as ensure they have the right people in the right places to build the house properly. Lastly, to continue the analogy, only then would I break ground and execute the strategy. In executing the strategy, I'd have both the means to measure the progress, as well as a process to solve problems at the root cause as they arise. They obviously wouldn't fall in perfect sequence, but these 4 main steps would ensure that I'm successful in building a great house based on my evolving circumstances. So we're not here to talk to you about construction. So Dennis is going to share with you our thoughts on how this analogy applies to continuous improvement.
Yeah. So similar to Ryan's house build analogy, the first step is to complete an org and talent readiness assessment to understand your current state. A number of questions that would be part of that process would include, do your current leaders have the capability and, quite frankly, the motivation to lead a culture change to a continuous improvement organization? Does the org structure that you have in place support the transformation? I think one of the things that's important as you think about the build and doing that readiness assessment is that you really want to be sure to define the strategies and objectives. What does success look like? What are the metrics and improvement priorities that are needed to to be successful? And then based on your strategy, build out what the future state org needs to look like to meet your goals. As you proceed through the journey, it's critical to standardize on content and leverage proven tools and build sustainable processes. I think one of the things that is critical from a lean focus perspective is providing some of the tools and those processes so you're not reinventing the wheel. Yeah, you may want to customize them to your situation, but they're available, and they're things that we'll talk about a little bit more as we go through the rest of the presentation. But as you execute, be sure you're solving problems at the root cause with permanent solutions, not just Band-Aids. Implement daily management tools and regular metrics-driven reviews to ensure you know how you're doing. It's important to know that even though we have a slide here with a left to right kind of a linear presentation, it's not necessarily a linear process. Sometimes it's nonlinear in that you go from doing an assessment into defining winning, going back, redefining around some of the assessment as you get a better idea around what success looks like. In other words, it's a catch-ball process over time. And at the outset, though, here's a recommended sequence of steps that, quite frankly, you'll perform numerous times each year as you build out what the next step in the journey looks like, what the next strategic or improvement priorities look like.
All right, so why, right? What does a good CI organization get you in your organization? So Dennis and I would like to share with you 3 benefits to a good continuous improvement organization. And the first is that of alignment. So in the traditional sense, not that this describes any particular organization on the phone, but in a traditional business, we hear and witness many of the following symptoms at our clients. So some have departments that are very siloed. They don't interact as much as they should. There is a lack of balance in these departments, which leads to bottlenecks and impedes flow. There's a culture of fighting fires, right? Where the person who puts out the fire or the person who makes the diving catch is the one who's rewarded. Meetings are not as effective as they could. There's too many, or even worse, the wrong metrics that are used without clear goals. And addressing those issues means only burying the symptoms, right? Pushing the rock uphill, but not effectively addressing the root cause of the problem. Any gardener will tell you if you don't get at the root, the weed just comes back. And that leads to an environment that limits itself by settling for good enough.
So in a continuous improvement environment, as we look at the other side of this slide, I think you see leaders who, in my mind, equip employees versus managers who command. And it really starts with clear communications, with ongoing two-way feedback. Good communication of the deployed and breakthrough objectives. Why there are objectives, why they are our objectives, and why we as a team, how are we doing, and why are we trying to get there. I think the communications feedback is just a critical component of what you see in a good CI environment. The next part is really around resources and tools needed to achieve breakthrough objectives, to make sure that they're provided. And one of the ways you do that is through good cross collaboration on Kaizen events, and making sure those Kaizen teams have what they need and the time they need to implement the changes that are going to make the business more efficient, more effective. I think then the third area is really around employee engagement, and as a leader, helping to ensure employee engagement is high. Again, Kaizens are a great way to do that, because I think people become more involved in what's going on and trying to make things better. And one of the things about employee engagement is really a mindset of let's make things better, really developing that type of every day I come in, I'm going to try to make the place a better, more prosperous business. And many times the other piece of what comes into play in a continuous improvement environment is the incentive systems, both financial and non-financial. And are they truly tied to the improvements that we're trying to make as a team? So 3 areas: good communications, making sure our employees have the resources and tools they need to make improvements, and then where possible, tying incentive systems, again, both financial and non-financial, to help drive those improvements. So I found, I think, a great article that I would just reference you to. It's footnoted on the presentation here. It's from Zinger and Folkman, who've done a lot of work around leadership and feedback systems, and just would suggest that you take a look at that online. It's available. It's free to read, and they do a really nice job connecting how good leaders, like we've been trying to describe today, lead to higher employee engagement, which then positively impacts retention and then directly connects to improved business results. And they have had some large studies and some extensive information that you can see there in the chart to the left that really emphasize just how strong that connection is. And so I think it's important to improve employee engagement and consider the broader participation, as I mentioned earlier, across departments and Kaizens, to implement those effective feedback and review processes. If you don't have those in place, very important to establish those and make sure they're very credible. And then where possible, consider incentive plans that reward engagement, both for the leaders to drive that engagement, but also for the employees so that they feel that ownership in the business.
All right, third and final point about building an effective continuous improvement organization is that it helps distinguish a company by building a sustainable competitive advantage. What this means is that change and growth happen over time, but effective measures are taken to ensure that these results are sustained and don't slide back to the way they used to be. So the process first starts with a critical view of the current state, where leaders then align around a good strategy for improvement. This strategy involves a regular cadence, a steady diet, if you will, of Kaizen events, which is often, in our experience, monthly. There's also an established means of measuring the critical few results, which is often a daily process, a daily management, and a way of solving problems at root cause. So takeaway is that companies that embrace continuous improvement continue to raise the bar over time in a sustainable manner, thereby distancing themselves from their competitors. So now that we've shared with you some thoughts about what good looks like, we'd like to talk to you more about how lean focus can help. Again, I'd like to emphasize that our approach varies by company based on each company's needs. But what you're about to hear are some of the ways that lean focus can partner with you on your own specific lean journey.
Okay, well, it's critical to prepare what the future org structure needs to look like. And I would tell you that from my experiences, one of the things that happens sometimes when we try to work on future state is we we get kind of hung up with our current talent. And it's good to kind of just clear the board, if you will, as you're preparing the future state org structure, and really look at what it's going to take, what it's like to meet your long-term lean transformation objectives and your business strategy. So again, do this without being weighted down by current talent and past history. Let that history go for a while and really get out there and think about the future state org. Then compare future state with the current state. You've done that work earlier, as we've talked about in this process, and it's pretty much just a gap analysis, right? Determine where the gaps are, and then I think it's very important that you prepare a detailed action plan, which prioritizes dates, et cetera, what the amount of work it's going to take to close the gap, and do that in a very prioritized manner. This may include development plans for current employees, and it also could be where you'll need to go externally to acquire talent, and what that talent needs to bring to your organization. Examples of that could be as you perhaps maybe expand more into a software space, and you don't have those resources. But it also could be in areas of leadership. So identifying where the gaps are, developing where you can, going externally where you can. As you see on the right of the chart here, we really kind of talk about some of the talent search milestones and processes we use from a lean focused talent solutions team. And we can certainly help there as you identify gaps and you need to go externally, but also we have resources that can help you to create development plans and provide some of the components that would go into this development plans. Right?
So next step in defining winning, it helps to separate the strategy into really two pieces. So a piece of planning and a piece of deployment. In strategic planning, what we're doing is defining the game we're playing. So strategic planning establishes the roadmap of where we want to achieve, uncovers the resource needs to achieve that goal, and thus highlights any organizational deficiencies or imbalances. It's often thus run in parallel or sometimes an iterative process, as Dennis talked about, with organizational assessment. Only after we know where we're going, what game we're playing on the planning side, can we then define how we're going to win. In strategy deployment, we are determining what new processes or new organizational muscle we need to develop in order to accomplish our strategic plan. We establish the right metrics, and finally, and most importantly, assign the right resource to lead each strategic objective. So many organizations have a strategy where everyone gets a nice color copy and then that copy sits on the shelf. What they do is they lack an established means of strategy deployment, and that often leaves the aspirations unfulfilled. So Lean Focus can help your team learn to do both effectively, both planning and deployment. So we can help with your team develop and point them in the right direction, but then most importantly, we can help you execute that vision using a proven method of monitoring and course correcting on that annual strategy. Next area that Lean Focus can help with is in having good tools. Anyone good at repairs will brag about the toolbox, and this is ours. Some organizations, those with good alignment, good engagement, and a sustainable competitive advantage, have a deep set of tools they can draw from to lead continuous improvement events in a structured, organized manner. The rest either don't embrace continuous improvement or rely upon each of their CI leaders to conduct events really in their own way, with either self-created content or content borrowed from the internet that may or may not be relevant to the topic at hand. Lean Focus can help solve this problem by licensing our toolbox. Each of these boxes on this slide represents a tool in our toolbox. We ourselves use these tools in leading Kaizen events at our various clients. These tools, though, can be licensed and rebranded as your own, either the entire business system, so every single one of these boxes, or just specific tools as need arises. These tools can also be licensed as bundles, for example, just the foundation system, which is down in dark blue. That's often where I advise clients to start when they are early in their journey, and then later evolve into licensing other bundles of the Lean Focus business system as their journey evolves. Last point is executing the strategy. So this is the area most often associated with lean focus, but as we've mentioned, not the only area we can assist. It's important to note again that our goal is not to become a permanent crutch, but rather to be a temporary support for clients that are building the right CI organization with the right tools to eventually stand on their own. However, we can assist, and in execution, we recommend first starting with what we call a lighthouse. So a lighthouse is a specific subset of a client's organization, usually a region or a business unit, to first adopt lean principles. So it's a proof of concept where foundational tools are used to establish a beacon, hence the name lighthouse, for the rest of the organization. So this slide gives an overview of the foundational tools, how they act in concert at the lighthouse to first diagnose and map out how value is created to the customer at the top of value stream map. This identifies the processes to be improved and sustained, and then tools such as standard work, success, daily management can be used to address those issues. So when problems do arise and backsliding begins to occur, an effective problem-solving process highlights the root cause and implements effective countermeasures to then deploy to mitigate that problem. So lean focus helps address these problems by creating an action plan, working with the client to create an action plan that uses these tools in appropriate sequence at an effective cadence. Again, this is usually monthly, so you don't want to start all right at once, but rather have a good strategy for how you're going to use these in concert, and that's why a good effective action plan is necessary and recommended at the start.
So I think it's always very useful to have either a client testimonial or an example to kind of walk through. And we want to take a look at one of our clients and kind of what they had to say about their successful journey so far. It never ends, right? And really kind of how lean focus has kind of helped in that process. So we're going to talk about a client here. And this client, after their Oregon talent assessment, did not feel like they had the internal talent to achieve the lean transformation that they wanted to make. So Ryan, I know this is a client you have closely worked with. So why don't you kind of take it from here and give us your firsthand insight here.
Yeah, so I can't say the name, but it's a publicly traded company, about $2 billion in sales. Great example of the 4 areas that we discussed earlier. So first, lean focus helped improve the org structure by first understanding the culture and identifying the talent gaps that allowed us to be laser focused on the exact needs of the client. We placed several folks, VP of Lean, to drive a continuous improvement culture throughout the organization. We then focused on leadership gaps at each of the strategic sites. So we were able to fill 2 regional manager roles in less than 120 days. Once leadership was in place, we focused on plant level leadership. The lean focused talent solutions team placed 5 plant managers across the United States. And the average contract to offer acceptance timeline was less than 90 days. Second, we worked with the team to set a good strategy and help deploy that strategy across each of their operating companies. We third, license our content and work with them to rebrand and tailor the content to their needs. So they had those tools within their own sphere of influence. They're able to send those out electronically, really help facilitate good events. So finally, where we are now is helping the client execute that strategy with monthly Kaizen events. And we are facilitating and often co-facilitating those events with their very capable CI leadership team while they get their feet under them and settle into place.
Great. Thanks for that example, Ryan. Well, we wanted to allow some time here at the end to do 2 things. One would be to answer your questions, but I did want to, before we jump to the Q&A, did want to mention that there are a number of different lean focus hosted webinars that are coming up. And some of these are basically on a monthly basis, and they're conducted by our other esteemed colleagues at Lean Focus. Next month is an event on May 24th on value selling. and on June the 26th, an event on how Lean Focus can assist with due diligence for those acquisitions. These webinars will then proceed monthly for the rest of the year. They're posted on our website, and you can certainly take a look at those at your leisure and hopefully attend. I wanted to say thank you to everyone that's joined, and as I mentioned a minute ago, we did want to spend about 20-30 minutes here at the end trying to answer questions. Hopefully we'll do better than a try and actually give you some good answers, but I think we were going to turn that over to get that process going. So, Damon.
Just a reminder to everyone that if you want to ask a question, that you can type it into the question panel in the Go to Webinar section. And without further ado, I will read some questions here. So this question is for, let's give this one to Dennis, because you've probably seen or heard of this one before. In a situation where the CEO or the president at the top maybe doesn't understand very much about lean or continuous improvement, and they don't feel like they have the proper buy-in, how would you handle that situation?
Well, I think the immediate answer I would have is to put them and connect them maybe in a kind of go to Gemba type of scenario where they can meet some of their peers and see some of the results and experiences some of their peers have had. I think in some of the larger organizations that I've been part of, that was easier to do because it may be between businesses within in part of a larger portfolio of companies. But there's nothing like going to Gemba and seeing it and kind of hearing that testimony.
Okay. Anything you would add, Ryan?
Yeah, just echoing that, but I would also mention that Lean Focus really has a team of folks on many clients, and so often a more seasoned or senior member of our team will work with the CEO, and then others will help orchestrate the events and facilitate some of the execution. So we often take a very team-based approach to solving the issues with clients.
Great. This next question.
Damon, before you go to that one, the other ad is, boy, is that if you're in that organization and the CEO is not there, one of the things I think we try to point out is they really need to be bought in. And so if that's not there, you really run the risk of wasting a lot of effort and actually probably doing yourself a disservice that'll be hard to recover from, because that commitment and involvement has to be from the top down.
Okay, the next question is from Scott. What all is included in the toolbox licensing topics? Does it include training materials, forms, and formats to use during Kaizen events? Ryan, can you answer that one?
Yeah, no, it's great. What we do is we license exactly the way that it is for us, which is extremely well laid out. So I'll compliment Damon for doing so. It's got all of the presentation literature, some templates for emails. It's got forms that can be used along events. It's got certificates. It's really got everything you need set up there, really nicely laid out for you. And so with a little bit of preparation, your team is ready to deliver content to clients in a very consistent manner. And I think that is one of the real advantages of licensing the toolbox, is that you don't just have where everybody does it on their own. You kind of have standard work for standard work, if you will. So you've got a way of orchestrating your events in a very consistent manner, which really helps speed up the adoption within your organization.
Great. The next question, what are some countermeasures where some departments participate in continuous improvement, but then the others don't, but are not held accountable? So some are playing and some aren't.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the short answer, it's not the easy answer, but the short answer is they need to be held accountable. They probably have that piece of it. I think, Brian did a nice job explaining some of the lighthouse pieces. So, again, it's educating and having folks see why it's not just a good thing for the company or the organization, but for the employees themselves. I know in some situations I've actually seen where we've tried to get some people out of areas that aren't as far along in the journey, or maybe they haven't got started, to participate in Kaizens in other departments, so that they hopefully can take that back to their teams and be good at talking about what's going on and why it's good. Ryan, I'm sure you've got some.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to suggest as well, is make sure to be very selective of your lighthouse. Don't just pick it at random. One of my clients spent a lot of time in doing so, and I thought that was great, to make sure that they were picking a representative area, but one where they had engagement, they had folks with the credibility within the organization to be successful, to then build some momentum for the rest of the organization. And I think that is extremely important, to try to have an example. It's never going to be easy to win over everybody, but there is a kind of a suggested means of persuasion, and having a good lighthouse that has credibility, that is representative of your organization, is certainly a best practice.
And I'll add one more thing, and I'll move on to the next question. I think where we add value is that the practitioner working in some of these areas that maybe are notorious for not getting involved, sales, marketing, R&D, and finance, and others perhaps, not knowing if those are some of the areas that you're struggling with. But the people on our team have either worked in those areas, in those functional roles, and have a litany of examples and best practices that they can relate back to those functions, versus coming in with manufacturing examples and unrelatable stories. So I think connecting with those people with the right experience and examples helps too. Okay, so this one here is: have you implemented lean continuous improvement in healthcare provider payer organizations? If not, clinical operations, the back office administrative operations like call centers and RCM operations. So I can answer part of the question. So actually affiliated with a private equity firm, and one of the businesses we bought was a home health, hospice, and rehab service business that has a lot of payer processes and provider processes within it. And we've been using the Lean Focus Business System toolbox to drive a value creation plan within that business, and have since tacked on 11 acquisitions in 18 months inside of that company since we've purchased that company. And then the second part, the administrative back office practices, Ryan and Dennis and many of our team. Ryan, that's probably mostly where you play, right?
Yeah, I actually just recently got off of Kaizen, doing a transactional process improvement for a call center. Now, this was a admittedly manufacturing company, not within healthcare, but similar processes to try to improve net promoter score and improve overall engagement with the clients, drop rate. So I'd imagine it'd be some similarities, but I myself have not done any healthcare, but I would suspect the transactional process improvement tool would apply really well for that specific circumstance.
Okay, this next question. I noticed that you do variety reduction. Please explain, what approach do you use? Please say more. I think they mean variation reduction in this instance.
Yep. Yeah, I've done several of those in my background, and Dennis, I don't know if you want to share some examples as well, but what variance reduction Kaizens look to do is turn noises into constants. So you dissect a problem by some of its main causes, and then look at each of those sources of variability as either a noise or a constant, so something that varies itself or not, and you're trying to reduce the variability for each of those specific items, and then develop an action plan that is prioritized. So you don't try to solve all of them, you prioritize the source of variability, and then look to implement things like fixtures if it's a manufacturing sense, or common forms or things like that in a back office. So those would be some of the countermeasures that you might take in a VRK type of event, but those are very powerful to improve quality, improve standardization within your process.
Okay, next question. Do you have any insights on what metrics to use for lean daily management Gemba walks in the offices of a manufacturing plant?
Dennis, you want this or you want me to?
Yeah, go ahead, Ryan.
Yep. So they vary. And that's actually what you spend a lot of time in the event doing is not just on a daily management Kaizen. You spend a lot of time coming up with the right metrics, and that does depend on the business. So it's not just going to be a hey, roll it out and implement these KPIs whether they're relative to your business or not. So much of the time of the event and the pre-work and in the first few days is spent on making sure you get the right KPIs. So that is the crux. But the question was some examples. So, in sales, you might be looking at things like how many orders weren't entered in any given day, or average fill rate. On things like on operational floor, you might be looking at quality, PPM, delivery, scrap. You might be looking at things like daily inventory. So those possibly could be some metrics, but what you want to try to shoot for is ideally one of each category of safety, quality, delivery, inventory, and productivity. You don't want to just fill out the box. So what I sometimes do is advise clients to start with, say, one or two. If they're not sure of the others, or maybe it's a little overwhelming because they're all brand new to this process, is to maybe start with just one or two and get them really good. So not just report the news with, hey, what happened yesterday, but why did it happen? And then most importantly, what are you going to do about it? So you have right there at your daily management process, you have are you red or green? What's the trend? Why did it happen? So you parade them the data. And then again, most importantly, what's the action plan to get us back on track? And so the actual metrics vary tremendously, but it's depending on the needs of the client based on their strategy and what's important.
Right.
An example in HR, for example, is things like maybe candidate flow for open positions that you might look at on a daily basis. But there's also metrics that aren't necessarily daily. They may be daily management in the overall sense. So executing development plans. You may not want to look at that every day, but you may want to look at that weekly because that's an ongoing process. So some things, don't fit necessarily that day cadence in some of the back office type environments. So just a couple of examples I know from HR, for example.
Yeah, that's a great point. And you can actually have a hybrid. So I client that I worked with a month ago set up some that were daily, some that were weekly, but still had a daily, they call it a Gemba walk process, where they would go around each board and see what happened and why and what people are doing about it. And they had a mix of both daily and weekly. So yeah, great point, Dennis, that although it's called daily management, not all metrics need to be measured on a daily basis.
All right, Dennis, this one's probably for you. Does Lean Focus overtake a CI department? Sorry, I missed that one. Does Lean Focus overtake a CI department or of an organization as a boost to the team, or do a get in, get out effort to help roll in and mature the program? So maybe talk about interim leadership, Dennis.
Yeah, I think there are going to be obviously different situations, right, that could arise. In some cases, what I think Lean Focus can certainly do is provide that type of interim leadership to help, kind of bridge the gap until something more permanent can be set up from an organization perspective. That's kind of on one end of the spectrum. On the other end, it's really just providing the tools to talent that may already be existing, that are really just anxious to add to their toolbox. So it's kind of that whole spectrum and everything in between.
I'd add to that, I've worked with clients that have either nothing at all, they're early in their journey and they're just aspire to one day have a continuous improvement organization. Then in the middle, I've worked with some that have something kind of getting started and we're really helping them. And then third, I've worked with clients that have an established organization that maybe has some needs within their CI team, or just really lack the capabilities or familiarity with a specific tool. So they bring us in to kind of enhance their existing team. So it really could be all three of those solutions. And I think also good use of the tools and licensing of the tools as necessary would really help enhance, not replace that CI team.
And Ryan, maybe a question to you, building on that, though, but where you could actually equip existing resources that have the right mindset, but also have the credibility of the organization. Does that bode well? I guess maybe that's a leading question for you, Ryan. But
yeah, no, I think it's going to depend on the circumstance. Sometimes yes, often no, but it really does depend on what they have to go on right now. And I found a lot of benefit though in just at least showing them the process that we at Lean Focus use in orchestrating an event, whether they license our tools or not thereafter. At least they have a good familiarity with, hey, here's what good pre-work looks like. Here's what it looks like. Here's what good standard work of an event looks like. Here's what good follow-up looks like. And so we're at least helping to set a good example for facilitating an event in itself. And so that's often a benefit to the client as well.
great.
Okay, so building off that question, get back to it here. Have you ever been asked to go back into an org that has already started down the lean journey and need to reinvigorate? What were some of your key takeaways? So it's one of your three scenarios that you just described, Ryan.
Yeah, I personally have not done it, Damon or Dennis. I don't know if either of you have, but I certainly have been involved with many organizations that are changing in themselves and have people that have departed that force us to change the action plan or maybe revisit the strategy. But in terms of us actually replacing some individuals, Damon or Dennis, maybe you can speak to that.
Yeah, so I can pile on. So about 5.5 years we've been doing this now, and we're probably coming up on about 300 to 400 clients. So this scenario has happened quite often, and generally what the triggering event is a leader that has a new set of expectations. So they come generally from the outside and they look around and they kind of, using Ryan's analogy, they assess the build site and they go, that needs to change, this needs to change. And oftentimes the way they're doing continuous improvement is one of those areas that they really want to transform because they're not satisfied with the results of it. And things like financial impact, skill level, and sort of followership of the team, many different things. So we're oftentimes brought in those situations, and the strategies we employ in those situations are the ones we already spoke to you about, where it's a combination of org and talent assessment, top grading, skill development, interim leadership, Kaizen facilitation help. So yeah, it's just a different entry point in the journey, but absolutely, we've done that.
And Damon, to pile on there, I think where I've seen it is that what you just described, a leadership change. But what that really means is, if you back up the processes and the mindset and the fabric and everything, just wasn't built with a sustainable approach. And that's why I think if we didn't say sustainable enough times during the first half hour, we should have said it more. It's not just about building; it's about building a sustainable environment. And the leadership coming, yeah, they may come and tweak some things, but I think what Damon described unfortunately happens, and you can usually just back it up and say, okay, the sustainable piece. In the effort for speed, sometimes sustainability gets overlooked.
Yeah, I I sometimes use the statement, I'd rather an 80 to 90% solution that is sustained than a 100% solution that falls down, right? We don't want to redo the work 6 months, 12 months from down the road. So let's not let perfect get in the way of better, but rather let's proceed with a good solution that we're able to sustain and have that incremental growth that I showed. So yeah, no, one more time of saying the word, two more times of saying the word sustainable, Dan, out of 10.
Like bingo. All right. So what is your view of the Lean Office deployed as a center of excellence with a rotation program? If rotation, what's your sense of the rotation timing? So, this is, do you want lifetime kind of occupants of the Lean Office, or do you want to rotate them, or some combination? Thoughts?
I've got one client who does use Lean as part of their rotation. They've more established organization, so they do use that as a means of training kind of the future leaders. And I believe it's a 18-month cycle is the one example that I can think of. But I certainly see value, because if you are successful in making Lean part of your culture, one of the benefits of a leadership rotational program is giving future leaders an exposure to each of those departments. And so what better way, if you're going to have a future CEO or COO, you certainly want to have her or him have that experience within Lean department. And Dennis,
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's well said. I'm an advocate of of rotation in general, and to have, if that's important to the organization, and that's what we're saying, then that rotation, it should be a critical component of that. It's kind of back to Gemba, right? It's kind of getting that experiential part, not just the training and a little bit of coaching.
Okay, Dennis, maybe you can take this one here. How do you incorporate change management into the deployment of the business system into an organization?
How much time do we have left here? That's a tough one. I think, to me, it starts with understanding your current systems around communication. And I think it's a difficult one to answer, because I think it gets to a lot of what we've talked about today. So we were talking to a client about, we were talking about employee engagement, right? And they said, oh yeah, my survey scores aren't really good, but my engagement's really high. And you gotta face reality first. Like, where are you as an organization, and what kind of change are you trying to drive, and what's that going to take? And we just a minute ago we're talking about these redos, right? Well, part of that is there are a lot of employees and organizations that are really saying, hey, what's the flavor of the month here, right? We're just trying to implement something new and different, and next month it'll be something else. So it's really a lot of communication and convincing that, no, this is where we're going, this is where we're headed, and this is why it's good for all the stakeholders.
Okay. So this one is about regulated companies, probably maybe two more here. So saw some med device companies you've worked with, but not any pharmaceutical manufacturing. If you have worked in pharmaceuticals, how do you attack an organization that is heavily regulated and not really set up for rapid improvement or rapid change? You guys want me to take a stab at that one?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, it's your turn, David.
So the first thing I would say is play by the rules. So what we don't want to have happen is going out onto the floor and start moving equipment without validation processes and without following change ECOs and things like that. So on the surface, it seems like things aren't happening maybe as quickly as you'd like them to. But I can tell you that the ounce of caution and sort of commitment to following the rules in that environment is well worth the effort. And we sort of learned this the hard way. We acquired our first regulated businesses back in 2006 in Danaher, but then we acquired even heavier regulated businesses in about 2014 timeframe. So some of us went in a little cavalier without an appreciation for what that meant and had to be reeled back in, thankfully, by people who brought that regulatory experience from the acquired company, then working together with them to say, it's not an either or, it's an and. How can we do things in a regulatory environment? How do we continue to drive continuous improvement? We don't give people the option to say, we can't do continuous improvement because we are a regulated environment. We figure out what that methodology is going to be. So I think oftentimes what you're really dealing with is resistance, and it's masked as we can't do this because we're a pharmaceutical company or a fill in the blank, whatever industry or regulated business you want to throw in there. So
yeah, I echo that entirely. I've never done for healthcare, but aerospace is a similarly regulated industry. And one thing I would just add to Damon's comments is the importance then of even more pre-work to define the scope of the event, what's in, what's out of scope. So you know your things that can't move, your constraints. And as Damon said, not everything can be on there, or so I think you really need to act in a more thought out manner in terms of doing your homework beforehand to know what can and can't move, so that you act accordingly.
Okay, Dennis, maybe give this one to you here. Do you think it's a good idea to incentivize employee involvement in the organizational lean journey? How do you exactly build it into the employee appraisal to sustain the journey?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea if you can tie involvement to the business results. And so I think as far as incentive, it sort of starts with the leadership and making sure that's built into if there's some type of management incentive program or bonus type program that driving improvement in engagement and in employee involvement is part of their objectives. But as you broaden that to all employees, and there's all kinds of programs and things out there today and in the past around gain sharing and those types of things, where they've worked is when that connection, that strong connection was there, so that people saw that what they're doing has an impact on the business. Where it hasn't worked is where it just becomes we got another 2.5% this year, not really sure what my connection was, or it was in lieu of a raise or something like that. So it sort of starts with that, and can you structure that in a way that I'm rewarded, I'm involved, I'm a business partner, whatever terminology you want to use.
Kind of a subset of that question, Dennis, how would you
Yes.
go about measuring skill level progression of the leadership teams who are learning and executing lean tools and methodology? So kind of, how do you do that in the appraisal process?
Yeah, well, I mean, the one example you do is you can do engagement surveys, right, and get that 360 feedback or feedback from employees, and as long as you can do that in a structured way that's not slanted in some way. I think the other part of that though is providing the development and the coaching to be more effective, and then measuring that to kind of to the question there. Not an easy thing to measure, but engagement surveys and just employee surveys are one way to do that.
Yep, for my personal experience, probably the biggest eye opener was when Larry Culp at Danaher changed the way we were all measured in terms of performance appraisal, where 50% of your performance appraisal was the results that you delivered, and 50% of the performance appraisal was the behaviors or the values that you exhibited in doing it. And it had clear criteria for how you went about delivering the result, one of which was your adherence to DBS or Kaizen as our way of life.
Mm.
So where the organization can get out in front of that is if you view it as important, then measure people, set the standard and measure people against it and tie your rewards and your performance to it. So it's a value
Yeah.
like any other.
Yeah, and be transparent that those are the things that are going to be measured, right? Not just on your objective performance form, but that it's important across the organization and it's being measured and rewarded appropriately.
Okay, we're on time. So
All right.
the webinar recording, as I mentioned, will be sent to you via an email. If you would like to continue the conversation or have further questions or would like to reach out to Ryan or Dennis or myself, our contact information is here. You can send us an email at info@leanfocus, or you can call the central line. You can also go to our website and explore many of these topics that Dennis and Ryan covered on today's webinar. So with that, I want to thank you for participating, and we hope to see you again next month. Take care and have a great rest of your week. Bye now.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody.